So we just started out in a good way with some protocols. I offered tobacco or reciprocity for the time and knowledge of our guests today. We smudged to ground ourselves and to cleanse our spirit and connect ourselves today with each other and with the four elements, as well as a prayer was offered. So thank you. Hi. Thank you for that. So we ask everyone to open their minds and their hearts to maybe some knowledge that they may not know. And with that, we'll probably hear some pretty cool stories and some interesting knowledge that will be dropped here today. And we just ask that you follow protocol in the sense that, if you want to share this, talk about these stories, these ideas, and just remember to connect it to the person that we're speaking of, as well as the lands that they're connected with. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our guests today to introduce themselves.
Tatanast Atta, Size Hal Eagletail Atta, from Tsuut'ina Nation, part of the Treaty 7 signing nations of southern Alberta, Canada, North America, third planet from the sun, Earth. It's a great honor to be here with all of you today, and I'm just appreciative of how we started. We lit the smudge, we did the offering of tobacco, and as our relatives across Turtle Island know, tobacco is one of our four main universal smudges or medicine plants that we collectively use. So tobacco, sage, buffalo grass, cedar, sweet pine, sweetgrass, these are all used amongst our nations for our guiding our prayers and guiding our days on a daily basis. So when we offer the tobacco, in its interpretation was the very first plant Creator blessed us with. And he said that this plant, or I should say Creator said, I don't know if he's he or she, Creator mentioned that this plant is a reflection of connecting with spirit world, but also a respectful reflection of taking something from Mother Earth. So we'll offer that tobacco when we receive and we take some of our plants and our medicines from the earth. That's kind of our way of saying thank you and kind of a payment, if that's how you interpret things. But tobacco was that first plant given to us by Creator, so we honor it with our prayers. We light it with the smudge, and we put it down whenever we come into one of our ceremonies or any of our social dances, or we request knowledge from our elders or knowledge keepers, spiritual leaders. So it's a great honor to be interpreting science in the ways of modern and indigenous thinking.
Yeah, so with that, Hal, what is science to you?
Well, science basically is just a connection with all living things. And if you want to go into a deeper sense of the science, there's also the quantum science, which is the connection with all spirit world and universal connections. And I think this is something that it gets deeper when you get into the quantum thinking. That's more of our real deep spiritual leaders, ceremonies, and reflection and parallels. But there is a lot of parallels between Western science and Indigenous science, in that we want to protect the environment, we want to protect the ecosystem, and we want to be contributors to those protections. And I do believe, and this is a reflection of our ceremonies, that the earth is at the edge of a cliff ready to fall over. And in our oral history, we talk about a flood starting all life all over again. We talk about ice starting life all over again. We, as human people, contributed to our own demise in the position we're in now, that we're at the edge of a cliff ready to fall over. What is preventing us from falling over is the respect that the indigenous populations of the world have for the Mother Earth already and continue to have. If those stop, if we don't pass on this knowledge, then that Earth's going to plunge into the next, I guess, cleansing of the earth and starting of life all over again. So we need to encourage our traditional people of North America, South America, the indigenous people of other parts of the world, in Australia, New Zealand. You have the Tibet monks that still offer ceremonies for the earth. You have the witches of Europe that still honor the medicines and the plants. We need to pass on all this knowledge. Once it stops, I think this is where we're going to have another starting of all life and all humankind.
You talked about the parallels of Indigenous science or maybe relational science and global or Western science. But I hear a lot of differences in the sense that there's this sense of reciprocity and respect that is within Indigenous or relational science. That's maybe not the science that often we are taught in school, that often we are, how we define science that is maybe objective, or it's reduced down to its little tiny parts where you don't, talking about quantum, you take a measurement of something static in time, but it's not real because it's always changing, it's always in flux. And there is these differences and similarities as well. Can you speak or expand on any of those?
Well, in our ceremonies, there's always going to be a conductor between this world and spirit world. And the conductor that really starts the process is what we call our pipe. The pipe is the center of all ceremonies. It's when bring this world and spirit world together. But there needs to be a conductor for the forces of these two worlds to come forward and to come through. Basically, we're talking in the terms of the realms or the dimensions that may exist out there. And the scientific community are studying this phenomenon of dimensional portal travel. The native people all over the world already had an understanding of this portal or this doorway between the worlds, the spirit world and this world. And this is where we conduct our ceremonies. This is where we influence our healing and our knowledge of the medicines, the plants, the different mixtures, the preparations. This is our connection with all living things in this world and in the cosmos. So when you look at, say, for instance, NASA trying to develop technology that's going to take us from Earth to Mars or to Jupiter or to other parts of the universe, and the time constraint that has on the physical body as well as the aging process, and how do we preserve our age in that type of long-term travel, traveling from one star to one planet or to whatever. Our understanding is that that instant travel is already in existence through our communication with the natural world. And this is where I think scientists now are studying the possibilities of utilizing what they call wormholes or portals from one dimension to the next. And
Very sci-fi.
yeah, it is. But for the native people, it's a reality. It's how we communicate with the spirit world. And this is how they come into our ceremonies. They talk and they give us messages. And they don't give secrets of what life after death, because these are creator's laws and they can't be interpreted while we're still trying to prove ourselves, really. But it helps us. It helps us manifest a positive identity for yourself and for people around you. And this is what the essence of being Indigenous is, to have a unified existence with all living things, not just the human life, but the natural world.
Yeah, it's like more that relationality of connection, not just with the circle of life and connecting with everything around us, but also with, like you were saying, those other dimensions, those other times. And I think, I was joking about, it's very sci-fi, but if you think of, science fiction as the future of going through these different portals and different dimensions, and how that's, it's way in the future. We can't even think about how to do this. We have to figure out all the technology. But is that just Indigenous science? Is that just relational science, where we've known for thousands of years that, okay, there is a way that we have these connectors, like you're saying, these portals, the pipe. Remember you saying that water is that connector too. When you pour that water onto the rocks in a lodge, in a sweat lodge, it creates that connector between the ancestors and the spirits, where we can, like you say, receive knowledge. It's not science fiction. Is that just Indigenous science?
Well, that water you mentioned is the lubricant between the portals. That's what allows this world and spirit world to come through to each other. So you'll have water in all of our ceremonies. And when you have sightings, say, of the big guy, they call him Bigfoot or Sasquatch, or you have UFO sightings, there's always water around. Water is that conductor, like I said, it's the lubricant that allows us to coexist. My biggest worry when NASA's trying to build these spaceships for long-term travel is the fact that we're punching microscopic holes in our protective layer that protects the Earth. So when you look at the cell,
Launching rockets and whatnot.
yeah, so when you look at a cell in your human body, there's a protective membrane that protects the cell from outside foreign influences or contamination. And if you were to put a hole in that cell, it's going to kill the cell because of all these foreign entities and different chemical makeup is making its way in. Or losing from the earth our ozone protector, our oxygen, our emissions that are natural to this world. So the problem isn't global warming based on the energy output of technology. That's a contributing factor, definitely the oil and gas industry. But I think our biggest issue for ourselves is continually putting holes in the membrane that protects us from outer space. So we need to stop putting rockets into the
There's
universe
how many more
there.
now, too?
Yeah, I mean,
Daily.
why do we do that? I mean, we can never humanly or mathematically be able to get from Earth to, say, the next livable planet that's what they say, 100 light years away or whatever. And it's these dimensional portholes that'll get us there in an instant. So this is how we should be spending our NASA dollars,
Ooh, okay.
is the studying
Are you
of
listening,
our
NASA?
own knowledge from the Indigenous people to cooperate. And I think if we go back to my original interpretation of the Earth being at the edge of a cliff ready to fall over, there's going to come a time in the future where government, society, scientific community are going to be at the cusp of killing us all off due to our own negligence of our actions. And then they're going to come to the native people, the indigenous people of the world, and say, how can you help us fix these things? And it's going to be too late.
Do you think that's happened yet?
It's not yet. We're almost
Close?
getting there. We're getting there. But if we start involving now our native people, our indigenous people of the world and their knowledge of the natural laws, and how can we work together to prevent this catastrophic end of world, end of time, we call it in our native culture. Let me give you a good example. There was a sickness back in the mid-'80s that had no knowledge of how it started in the United States South. And it was killing people through a respiratory, unknowing to anybody at the time, hantavirus is what they called it. And
But
after
at the time, nobody knew what it was.
at the time, no one knew how it was being spread. So with failed attempts at scientific community to try analyze and to protect the people, the Navajo spiritual community had to sit down with these scientists and these doctors. And they went through a ceremony. They went through one of our traditional practice for thousands upon thousand year ceremony, and we asked for assistance from the spirit world. And after that ceremony, the spiritual leaders told the scientists, check the rodents. That was the message they got. So they looked into the rodents and they found a pattern of the pinion boom seasons, which were like every 4 or 5 years, there would be this pinion boom. And all of this excess food would give an explosion to the rodent population. And they correlated that these outbreaks happened with these booms of pinion. And then they found further, because of the rodent explosion of population, the droppings of the mice, when it dried, led to the airborne virus of the hantavirus. And this is how they're able to identify through that ceremony to check the rodents.
So the local community figured out, that Navajo community figured out through ceremony what the problem was. Did that community go to the scientific community and say, hey, figure this out? Or
I believe it was the doctors and scientists coming to the native community.
Yeah.
And I read this in a scientific journal, actually. They had a picture of the doctors and the ceremonialist Navajo sitting there. And then they had to write up of, this is how we discovered where the source came from. It was from the droppings of them rodents and these boom pinion nut seasons.
So maybe in the future we'll, see all the elders and knowledge keepers sitting down with the NASA scientists and talking about portals.
Well, this is the quantum side of things. This is the real getting to the, I guess, cellular interpretation of science. And I truly believe through our traditional teachings, even though we weren't brought up in a scientific terminology with all these big words, they complicate things. It's like how the human people categorize animals, mammals, birds. They can't just simply look at them the way native people look at them. We don't say this is the reptiles or this is the mammals. We say these are our brothers and sisters. That's our brother, the bear. That's our sister, the eagle. That's how we look at them. We don't categorize them. We're not higher than anything that's natural law. And this is why whenever we take something from the earth, we always have to give an offering for it. We don't just take without paying that tobacco or that request